Welcome back to Telos, the Purpose Podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Liz Bridge, a lady who worked as a chaplain at Wandsworth prison for years, and we speak about how she experienced firsthand what it was like to be in a prison that's almost double its maximum capacity, and that the people inside aren't a separate species of evil. They're people who have made mistakes, often similar to our own, except theirs weren't forgiven or hidden like ours were. She speaks about the conditions in a rundown prison, what it's like to be in a constant state of fight or flight, and how there's such a lack of methods for rehabilitation so that prisoners can come out better than they were when they went in before. She says that someone can go in there sane and come out completely insane. It's a challenging and eye-opening conversation, but honestly quite relieving to have someone speak about a system that's spiralling out of control with so much clarity and compassion. And if that sounds interesting, stick around, and I hope you enjoy, and please leave some feedback. Let's get into it. So, you've spent years as a chaplain.
Yes.
What pulled you into that world in the first place?
I'm a Quaker. One of the chaplains at the prison wanted to set up an organisation that would mentor men outside the prison. And she made a poster that was like an American cowboy poster, wanted, and a picture of a man, people to mentor. And I thought, well, I could mentor somebody that had come out of the prison. It doesn't sound as if it's that odd. And I've got teenage boys, and I can do it. And I got to know her. She was the first vicar I'd ever met or got to know. And I was frightened of vicars and priests. I had no idea what they'd be like. And I got to know her, and I mentored 2 or 3 men that came out of the prison with mixed success. But then she said, I want to teach money management in the prison. You're an accountant, you can do that. And I started to go into the prison to teach money management. And then the job of the Quaker chaplain came vacant, and I was getting older and about to retire, and I thought, I can do that. I mean, honestly, I've got no break on me. I think, I can do that. And I started to go in 1 day a week. And there aren't any Quakers in Wandsworth Prison generally. We're not a particularly law-breaking bunch. Too old, people might say. So I used to go and see either what I used to laughingly call the nuns, because when they were asked what faith they had, when they arrived at the prison, they wrote none, N-U-N, which is a very, very stupid thing to do. Because if you write any faith, a chaplain, who's generally a nice body, will come and see you. If you are stupid enough to write none, you are stuck in there on your own with only officers. So I would go out to see if I could find the nuns. And I would also go picking up the lists of men on what's called in prison terms an act. That means that somebody thinks they're suicidal or they're seriously self-harming. And in the prison in those days, there were about 80 at any one time. And chaplains were supposed to see them once a week at the very least. So I would pick up the acts lists and see who I could find. And try and get officers to get them out of their cell to sit and talk. Curious thing to do, because when you are a middle-aged, middle-class woman who has clearly to anybody in the prison not had the same life they have, you arrive at a cell door of somebody who is seriously self-harming or suicidal, and often has absolutely nothing in the cell. And you knock at the door and you shout through the door jamb. Well, what do you shout? Hello, I'm a chaplain. Do you want to talk? Are you all right? Well, you look through the window and the phrase, are you all right? I mean, you can answer for yourself, because the answer is blindingly obvious. But you've got to begin a conversation. And you've got to try and indicate somehow or other to this other person that you'd be a sympathetic ear, a non-judgmental ear, a friendly voice.
Do you think they've got in their head, like you said, you're a middle class, middle-aged woman, in their head they're thinking, you don't know what I'm going through.
You don't know what I'm... often it's a boy or it's an old man. And of course, a woman doesn't know, misogyny is rife in the prison, we pretend it isn't, but, misogyny is rife. A woman, will she ever understand this? She's got all her teeth and she's a chaplain, she's a do-gooder. So she's never done anything. What's she gonna know? It was a very hard slog to get over that hiccup and say, just come out of there. If I can get an officer to open you up, will you come out? And will you come and talk? Let's see if we can just talk through what's driving you nuts. And even then, when I say started to break the prison rules, one of the prison rules is you don't give food or drinks, or you don't give things to prisoners. Now, I always used to hunt in the co-op, had very good cheap toffee, which was very soft in its wrapper. If you drop a soft toffee on the floor of the prison and stand on it, it becomes flat enough to kick it under the door jamb. If you're talking to a man who's crying or kicking the walls and you say, look down, and he finds that you've kicked through a toffee, the other thing that would go under the door jambs is very small packets of Haribo. It's quite hard to hate somebody who's given you a packet of Haribo.
It's a symbol that you care, and therefore they may open up.
Well, and that you've broken the prison rules already. They know they know that you're doing something that's not really supposed to be done, and that that you're another human being. And that if you can get officers to open so you can sit down and you can say, I've got some boiled sweets. Do you want a sweet? You're talking to somebody who's sitting in the middle of absolute chaos. They have very often broken up their cell. They haven't anything. To sit with another human being and a bag of boiled sweets is a beginning. And also, as a chaplain, you're not supposed to eat or drink with anybody. Again, I used to say, have you got a kettle? Have you got 2 cups? Shall we see if we can make you a drink? Because how does ever any other human being put another human being at ease? Well, in British society, saying, shall we have a cup of tea, and seeing if you can boil a kettle and find a tea bag. It doesn't matter if there's just one, we can share it. Again, it's against prison rules. But honestly, nobody's going to poison you with a tea bag in the prison. And by the time... And you could throw boiling water over your chaplain. You could. But there's a moment when I think, oh, I'll take the risk. This seems... I'm not talking about a man who's the fighting temeraire. I'm talking about a man who's crying. The chances of him pouring boiling water over me, or boiling tea, and ever having tea in the prison that's that hot it can hurt you.
Why is it worth taking the risk?
Because this is another person in such terrible trouble that I wouldn't want to be them.
Do you think that no matter what, every human being has an opportunity to make the most out of whatever situation they're in, and therefore a helping hand is all they need?
Yes, I mean, when I look back in my own life to what has helped me in particular moments, it has often not been the person who could give me £100. They weren't big gifts or big gestures. Actually, the things that have helped me are people who've made me laugh, or said I'll walk with you to the bus stop, or bought me a coffee. And that knowing what I sometimes hope, pray for, is that I will see when another human being is in need, recognise it, and act appropriately. Because I think that the gestures that are needed are often quite small. You know, you are important to me, is often all that needs to be communicated.
People feel so alone with
Yes.
their problems and their situation, right?
And that the knowledge that when they tell you what it is, that it's not so shocking. You know, that other people have not bonded with a baby. Other people have had terrible waves of temper that they don't know what to do about. It's that you're not the first person to have experienced it, and that actually sometimes just saying what it is you'll be able to find the road on your own once you've faced it.
Do you reckon part of the problem that people have is the confusion of what is actually wrong?
A lot of people in prison have been in care and have been the victims of violent crime and sexual abuse. Not all, but many. And that sourness can lead to anger, unprovoked anger, anger in inappropriate situations, jealousy, but behaviour that the rest of us don't really understand. And they don't understand it either, because they've never owned up to what's happened. And also, when you are the child of parents, you think your parents are Mr. and Mrs. Average. And that your home is the way all homes are. So actually recognising that your parents were rubbish might be very beautiful, might be very friendly, but we absolutely sodding useless as parents is very difficult.
And do you think for them to come to the realisation of that is the first step for growth?
It helps. It helps. There's a phrase that's used in the prison when people are being taught to be dads. Think about what your dad was like. Do you want to be like your dad? Because if you don't, you're going to have to do some work on imagining who you want to be and working towards it. But if you don't think about it, you'll end up being the dad that you once had. Now, I think that's quite an interesting thing to say to people who've had very poor dads or no dads. Imagine who you want to be.
I've heard a phrase before which really interested me. I can't recall where I heard it, but it was, face your demons or they'll raise your children. And it's quite dark, and it
Yes.
shocks people to the core. But I think there's some truth that rings with that. I think that, as you just said, a lot of people take the bad things from their parents, that their parents were as parents. And they may have the same flaws when they become parents themselves. How do you think someone confronts that and change that aspect about themselves when they're in such dire situations like being in a prison?
I don't think in our prison service anybody does, particularly. Perhaps the people that go to church services start to have a bit of a think. Maybe the people that go to the library and start reading have a bit of a think. But life in our prisons is about surviving day to day. It's not about being introspective. It's managing to get your meals and managing to get through the day. So we haven't got enough work going on in our prisons to write people's lives. You know, why are you a drug addict? Why are you an alcoholic? Why are you a child abuser? You know, they're all things that need, that's why people are in prison, but we're not working on it. We're keeping them muddled up with other people who have as difficult a lives as they've had, and then we let them out again.
And sometimes they come out for the worse.
I'm sure, to be honest, you can go into that prison sane and come out insane very, very easily.
Do you think there's a constant state of fight or flight mode for the people in the prison?
Yes.
So they don't have the time to...
Nobody feels safe. To an outsider, you think, oh, a person who's been sent to prison is an other. They're a Martian. They're a different sort of person from me. And when they go to prison, they'll be with people like themselves. So they'll all be bad together and they'll all trust and be a bad club. But you don't realise that somebody that has driven a car when drunk and dangerously has never stolen anything and would never attack anybody sexually. Somebody who has been a sexual predator would probably never steal. Probably is not violent. everybody that goes to prison is very frightened of everybody else because they don't know what they've done and they don't know how far they'd go. And there is a lot of violence in the prison because the wild and the mentally ill will force the pace. And everybody is very frightened. Everybody's very watchful. The man, I went to see a man in prison yesterday. Now, he's in a prison of sex offenders. He's very old and is on a wing of very old men, and somebody attacked him and threw a cup of coffee over him. I was surprised because they're all sex offenders in there, so it wasn't, you're a nonce, I'll attack you, because the attacker would have been a nonce, to use the bad word. I said, what was it about? And he said, we were all watching the television and I laughed at something and he thought I was laughing at him.
Do you think that's obviously, you know, like you said, people are in prison for different reasons, like particularly in Wandsworth, they're all in there for different reasons, but just people are the only types of people who can form a group and it work. Unjust people don't make good groups with other unjust people. And there's a famous scene in one of the Batman films, and it's at the beginning, and the Joker and a crime group rob a bank, and throughout the robbing of the bank they all start killing each other because they all want the money for themselves. And it's an example of how unjust people don't trust each other and they can't form together.
I think that is a mistaken view because it starts off with the sentence that unjust people can't. Now, actually, in the prison, everybody is exactly the same person as the people outside. Some are very loving, some are very unloving. It's just people. So you sometimes see pairs of men sharing a cell who, if I say grow to love one another, everybody thinks I mean sexually, and I don't. They become a married couple, they care for they watch out for one another. One will go and get the dinners, the other will go and get the toilet roll. One will go out to socialise, while the other one has the lavatory to himself. They begin to bond, and great friendships are formed. It's as loving a place as a public school. You have great friendships, you have great mistrusts. You know, people know, with experience, people don't initially trust, but then they grow to trust. And they grow to look out for one another, but into the mix of our British prison, we have a lot of people who should be in a mental hospital. They frequently are quite young. They've become reclusive. They're mentally ill, they're reclusive, they're in their mum's back bedroom. Their family are sheltering them because they don't get any help and don't know what to do. There's an incident at home where they attack a family member. Somebody panics and dials 999, and that person ends up in the prison. They are frequently nuts, suicidal, self-harming, unable to relate to others. Now, God help you if you're sharing a cell with one, but equally, in the mix of the wing, they don't fit easily because they're seriously ill. So you have prison, as a person in there, prisoner or chaplain, you watch all the time for who can pass the plates, who can see that you haven't got a plate and pass you one, who couldn't do that, who can barely speak.
How do you pull a person who's in such a dark mental health hole out of it? Do you think faith could do that for someone?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of work to be done by psychiatrists before faith can genuinely grow. I think it's easy for religion to be a pattern and to be a club in the prison, which is a nice club to go to, but I'm not sure that you're really
getting it,
growing it. You're getting the stand up, sit down, say the words, and they'll patter things to you like only through Jesus. But it's difficult because I'm a Quaker. What I would say is the love, the tolerance of other people, the care that you have to show, that I would argue God wants you to show for others. I'm not sure that works really until you're sane. And these are people with lives where other people have beaten them up, other people have tricked them, other people have made them homeless, other people have stolen from them. They have a lot to be forgiven for because they have done something that has ended them up in prison. But they have a lot of grudges and a lot to forgive. And forgiveness is a very hard concept when you really have things to forgive. Most people can't do it. If you think for yourself of the small grudges you have that you polish yourself, and actually they're not very important things.
Why do you think forgiveness is so important?
As much as anything, because religiously I was taught I had to do it. And I know that is true. But it's a bit like eating 5 pieces of fruit and vegetables a day. I don't understand why. But I know that the people that carry the deep grudges and polish them hard don't live happy and fulfilled lives. And that the more you can leave the past behind, not polish your grudges. If you can't forgive, just leave alone. You will grow. And it's one of these sort of, I would say it's an observable truth about things, that the people that can forgive can move, and very often the people that can't. It isn't their enemies that stay mutilated or maimed. Having something that you can't forgive is very damaging.
I believe that the principle of reciprocity is one of the most cross-referenced principles in the Bible. If I have examples here for you, I think judge lest ye be judged. Forgive and you will be forgiven, as Luke 6:37. Do you think that, at the foundation of forgiving those who have done wrong to you, in a way you open up the potential for people to forgive you too?
Well, hopefully, no, I don't think it's
Reciprocity.
reciprocity.
It's a hard one, yeah.
It is.
It's a tongue teaser.
Because, in a way, often the crimes that were done to you are nothing like the crimes you do. And you need forgiveness for what you do. And we all need that, and we're all promised that. But in order to be forgiven, I think a Christian would say you actually need to actually understand what you did and realise just how nasty it was, and say sorry and mean it. But forgiving is equally difficult, and in a way they're different things. I mean, I was brought up in a home where, when I was little, there was a man who'd come back from a Japanese prisoner of war camp. He was an uncle. And my aunt never forgave the Japanese. Never. And he died I was about 6. He never really recovered. And she did not forgive what had happened to her brother. She had had a lovely, bouncing, funny brother who came back a shell and lasted about 10 years and died. And she couldn't forgive. She was a very serious Christian, and she really tried. And would often talk about the fact that she couldn't do it. For me, it was the trying. She tried. But did that mean she wasn't a delightful person, and that when she did things wrong, she didn't say sorry for them and get forgiveness from it? It was not the same sort of thing at all. Her life was a life which had probably what you might call very little to be forgiven in it. She was a delightful, sensible, kindly teacher. Something terrible had happened to that family.
You've seen the worst in humanity, and you still believe in people. Why is that?
Because I like people. Because actually, even when you meet awful people people who've done awful things, they often have something going for them. Just as the people who are very, we all know the saints can be buggers. Very difficult people to be with. And that we've all got better sides, and we can all rise to the occasion. So I think I like people.
You said, if a man is standing outside the gate with no money, no phone, Nowhere to go and nobody who cares. He is being set up to fail.
Yeah.
I couldn't just walk past that. You're a very compassionate person. Do you think that that compassion that those people feel is just enough to keep them going through the darkest of times, and it provides them with the light at the end of the tunnel?
I think sometimes just kind words from another human being can get somebody a little bit further along the road. And sometimes just getting a little bit further along the road, breathe for another day, see what'll happen.
All they're lacking is just a little bit of encouragement, would you say?
Well, no, they're lacking an awful lot, actually, but they are in charge of their own lives. We're all in charge of our own lives, and we've all made our own lives. But we all sometimes reach the bottom of the barrel. Mm. And that a kind word from somebody else and a bit of encouragement is probably as valuable to our Prime Minister as it is to somebody going out to Wandsworth prison. That life can seem very, very treacherous and very bleak. And a laugh, knowing that the whole world doesn't hate you, can be the bit further on. And I do think that, things like a £10 note or a £5 and a cup of coffee and...
You were banned for helping someone.
Giving somebody money, yes.
What did that moment teach you about the system?
Oh, I felt terrible. I felt absolutely awful.
For the person or for doing it?
No, that I was being thrown out when I had an enormous empire. I was very proud of it, very proud of it. I was being thrown out of my enormous empire of what I considered to be good and useful things. I am a person who's always been a good girl, always done well, always tried hard, and I was being expelled from school. I felt terrible. When I thought about it carefully and thought about the people and the circumstances where I had given money, and then said to myself, well, would I do it again? Truthfully, the terrible answer was, yes, I would.
What did it teach you about the way the system's run? You were doing something out of the goodness of your own heart, whether it's based on your faith or your deep compassion for people. You're doing something which I'm sure you would, as I do, would deem very good. These are people who, as you said, they have nothing. No money, no phone, nowhere to go, and nobody cares.
One of the men I gave money to had been in the cell next to the cell I was using for second-hand jigsaw puzzles. And he attempted to hang himself. Now, every day when I came in to work, I would knock on his door and wave at him because I wanted him to watch out for my second-hand jigsaw puzzles. I didn't want them pinched, and I wanted him to be my eyes and ears. So as I arrived, I banged on the door and said hello. And I saw the two swinging legs, okay? Now, if it's ever happened to you, I can't explain to you the panic and the nausea that runs straight up you. I called officers who went in, and I was kept out of the cell because I was not an officer and was useless. So I had to wait for them to cut him down, to see if they could revive him. I was this was a boy. I was so frightened. Now, by the end of that afternoon, he was sitting in my room. I'd cuddled him, which again is you're not supposed to do. He was drinking tea with me and complaining about the fact that his neck hurt. And I was saying I was very, very pleased his neck hurt and I wished it hurt more because I didn't want him to ever do it again. And he started to say that he'd grown up in care, that he had no mum, no dad, that everybody else in the prison had somebody looking out for them, that everybody knew everybody else, and that the only family he had in the world was a brother who'd been in some sort of gangland fight and was mutilated and was just a vegetable, and that he was absolutely alone in the world. And everybody in this prison had money and he was on basic. He had no money and he had nobody to send him anything. And he was crying. Now, he wasn't, when I say he wasn't manipulating me, he wasn't actually. He was telling me as it was for him. And he felt completely alone. I said I cared for him, that I could find him some clothes out of my stock of clothes, and that I did care for him, and that he always made me laugh, and that, you know, here he was important to me, I didn't want him to ever do this again. And I moved £25 on the back system into his account because I wanted him to feel that he had somebody that was looking out for him. And that I knew that in that period of time, in that 4 weeks, say, he was going to be very vulnerable. He was taking spice, he was doing all sorts of stupid things. And that if he could attach himself to his chaplain and feel looked after, he might be able to hang on to some sort of reason. And actually, he did much later on, because the things I was accused of went over, you know, it was a long period of time. I saw him on the wing, and he was on another wing, and he'd got friends, and he was jiggering and pokering about and laughing. And I'd got him through that period of time. Now, whether I'd got him into being a straight and sensible citizen, I very much doubt. But I had kept his body and his soul together. And the Lord will have to work on the rest.
How do you deal with the, you know, externally you're being banned, and then internally you know you're doing the right thing? You're being pulled in two different directions here.
You start to see, you end up looking at the prison and thinking, well, actually, that was, it's a crummy institution.
Prison's a hot topic at the moment. I think in my research I saw that Wandsworth is almost over double its maximum capacity. Tell me a bit about the inhumane conditions of Wandsworth, as you've once put it.
You have to imagine a cell. And a cell is a bit like if you go into a semi-detached house and you run up the stairs, there's usually a bathroom at the head of the stairs. And that is the size of a cell in Wandsworth. And where the bath is, imagine a pair of bunk beds. So there's a lavatory in there with no privacy curtain and no partition round it, at the head of a pair of bunk beds. There's a sink in there which has no plug and generally no, when I say taps that you press and will give you water for 8 seconds. But you can't, and very often the basin is so small you couldn't put 2 hands in it. And then there's a counter and 1 chair. So, and you are going to eat, you're going to be in there for 22 hours a day with somebody not of your choosing. Somebody, you know, stand at a bus stop and take a look at somebody else at the bus stop that you don't much like the look of, and imagine that's who you're going to be with now for 22 hours a day. They may be insane or semi-sane. They may have a very fractious temper. They may be an alpha male when you're not an alpha male. They may have very different views to you on gay men, religions, food, when to turn the light on and off, when to watch the television. If they are the alpha male and you're the beta male, you'll almost certainly get the top bunk. There is no ladder, so you'll just jump up and down. If they're the alpha male and you're the beta male, they'll get the chair to sit on to eat their dinner. You will be taking your dinner up to the top bunk, and you'll be eating all your meals on your bed. You'll be going to the lavatory in front of one another. He may comment upon the lavatory, your lavatory habits. You may not like his. He may or may not wash.
The smell must be horrible.
Yes.
In that room.
You may not have a crime that is anything like his. You may want to read. You may want, because I talk to people like you, very middle class people. You may want to read. You may have very strong views about watching the news, watching documentaries. He may want to watch Cash in the Attic and Love Island all the time. He may want to watch Love Island through the middle of the night. The light may be on, it may be off. You may decide that the only way to survive is to become the alpha male and beat him to a pulp. You're going to do 22 hours in there.
So that's 2 hours a day.
Out.
Which includes outdoors?
Sometimes men will tell you that because they want to shower, and therefore there's a queue for the shower, if you're only out for 2 hours, you'll spend an hour in the queue for the shower. So you don't go outdoors because you'd miss your queue in the shower. So you sometimes have to choose. If your phone isn't working, you may want to use a wing phone, so you'll queue for the phone. So in your period out, you have to decide what your priorities are. Are they getting the toilet rolls? Are they telling an officer that you haven't heard from your wife? Are they, where is my property? If you want to go outside and go in the yard, right, you will be wearing the clothes that you are wearing in your cell. Right, you won't have a coat or any other clothes to put on. Now, you know what the weather's done recently? You'll be wearing your inside clothes out. You'll be wearing the shoes that you were arrested in, or the trainers you were arrested in, which you may well have done a year wearing and may not be waterproof anymore on a big yard. So men like going out in the summer, in the sun, but you don't get that many people who want to go out in the wet or the cold. People do want to go out, but our yards are very, very bare. I mean, you won't see a tree. You will see geraniums sometimes or plants, but not exactly many.
Do you think that alienates the prisoners from life, nature? Do you think that takes a toll on them mentally?
I've always thought it was fun. Right. One of the things that the charity used to do at Christmas was ask people to give them knitted hats. And the knitted hats would come in, people had knitted them, and they were very funny because they were all sorts of colours and all sorts of wool. And they were all sorts of colours and soft. The prison is grey and pale blue. Everything is grey. Everything smells, everything's tacky, everything's hard. Everything that you think might be soft, like the bedclothes or the clothes, have been washed 1,000 times and have a sort of, well, there's a toughness to them of clothing that's been washed 1,000 times and a grease to them that's been washed 1,000 times. So these hats would come in and they were red and pink and pale and turquoise, and they were soft. And they smelt very often of the women that had knitted them. And the giggling that went on about the hats was, and the wearing of the hats and the joking about the hats was extraordinary, because we don't have colour and we don't have softness.
So the prison lacks colour. It's
Yes.
just plain. I wonder what is desirable for the way the prison to be designed, because prison's supposed to be like a deterrent from committing crime. You know, you don't want to go in there. At what point do you draw the line between prison being something, you know, you don't want to go to, but also it being good enough so that it is humane?
I'm not sure it's a deterrent to anybody. I don't think our recidivism rates are so high that, and the men that commit crime again have all been in prison, and they know how horrible it is, and it is horrible, and they know how horrible it is. It doesn't work as a deterrent, because it breaks lives. It doesn't, you know, if you are shoplifting because you're homeless and you're an alcoholic and you're pinching alcohol from places, or you're stealing meat, selling the pub to buy alcohol, going to prison is a horrible 6 months, but you come out and you're an alcoholic and it all starts again. We ought to go another way. There are two sorts of prisoners, let's say. The ones we are frightened of because they are dangerous, and the people we are very angry with because they have disturbed our lives. Now, the frightening prisoners we have got to keep in prison, but we can give them colour and hot water and safety. But we don't dare have them out. They have really badly hurt other people. But the people we're angry with are very, very often mentally ill, alcoholic, addicts of all sorts. We ought to keep them in the community and spend £50,000 per year on keeping them in the community with their existing family, with any job they've managed to scratch together. Because if we take them into prison and pop them back into society 2 years later, they have no family and no job. And we've done nothing for them in the meantime.
You're currently working with two groups. One's a charity and one's a people improvement program, did you say?
A prison
improvement program. Tell us a little bit about the two groups you're working with, and what's the aim?
The aim of the charity is to improve the lives of people in the prison by providing some stuff. So it begs money, it begs second-hand jigsaws and some second-hand stuff, but not a lot. But mostly it begs money, and it buys predominantly wind-up radios, because if you are in the segregation unit, so you're completely, you've been fighting, off your head. You sit in a cell in solitary confinement with nothing. Okay, you are allowed a wind-up radio. A wind-up radio will keep a man sane. You can listen to music, you can listen to the human voice, you can hear the news. We buy wind-up radios. We buy a vast quantity of felt tip pens and adult colouring, because actually sitting colouring in a picture or drawing keeps people sane. I buy a lot of kits for wooden toys, where you have a balsa wood kit and you push out the pieces and then you make a dragon or a telephone box, or little toys that you can put in your cell, and you've made it and done it and achieved it, and you can say you'll give it to your kids when you go out. You can paint them. Passes time creatively, amusingly. People are incredibly proud of their dragon or their dog, or they're incredibly proud of them. And we buy all that stuff. We buy second-hand reading specs. Poundland reading specs. Because nobody goes to prison and takes their reading glasses with them. Many of the men in the prison have never been to an optician. The opticians work in the prison, I think, 2.5 days a week. It's 1,400 men who've all arrived from the street. You need more than that. So Poundland specs, all sorts, paints and murals, second-hand jigsaws, and then there's the release cupboard, because many people go out with literally the clothes that they're standing up in. They have nothing more than their prison clothes to go out in. Or they were picked up in June wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and what they've got to go out in December in is those shorts and the t-shirt. So we can dress them, and we buy from charity shops second-hand coats if we can't beg them. Brand new underwear, sometimes waterproof sleeping bags, so that somebody that is going out homeless at least goes out warm and starts the business of life dry. So that's the charity, which is about money and stuff. But it doesn't lobby politically. Right. Then there are a group of friends who are the improvement campaign, and there is a bigger email list and a bigger network, and that is about lobbying for change in Wandsworth Prison. And we have some aims, which I'm going to try and find for you. And our aims are decent cells and showers. That everybody should get all their medical treatment and their meds at the right time. That there should be more time out of the cell. That everybody should be given something useful to do. That they should be encouraged to keep in touch with their family and have the ability to do so. Anything that will reduce self-harm and suicide, so the levels go down in that prison. Making visitors feel welcome. And finally, support for the foreign nationals, because we have a lot of men in the prison who are brought to Wandsworth because it's close to Heathrow Airport, and they're foreign nationals going to be deported or extradited, and English isn't their language. And if anybody can feel lonely and a long way from home, a Vietnamese who's been traded into the UK, probably as a slave, and who doesn't speak any English whatsoever, is a very lonely man.
Do you think that these things that you've just listed as part of, both campaigns, charity and campaign that you're working with, could be so important for stopping. What was the term you used for the people who recommit crimes?
Oh, they're recidivists.
Recidivists. Do you reckon that those things there that you've just listed could stop that problem?
No, probably not.
Do you reckon it could help? So that when people come out of these conditions and...
I really don't know, but there is a basic line as a human being where you say of another human being, whatever you've done, the start of the journey into a better future is being able to keep clean, being able to wash yourself and look after yourself, being able to contact your family and talk to anybody that knows and loves you, having something useful to do, because nobody's going to survive if they don't survive sane. And if you take a human being and they can't wash and they can't keep their clothes clean. I know it sounds weird. I used to laugh like a drain at the 1950s phrase, cleanliness is next to godliness. I now know it to be true.
Why?
Human beings don't do well if they can't wash. I don't know why. They need to... The body needs to look after the body. You need to look after yourself in order to begin to flourish. And a bar of soap and a comb and knowing what time your dinner's going to come, and that the people that speak to you civilly, is how you hold a human being. And then you say your prayers about recidivism. You hope to God that somebody can teach another human being how remorse, sorrow, hope for the future. But if all you do is hold a man and drive him nuts, you're not getting anywhere. And hot water. I used to wonder about other religions, because most other religions, other than Christianity, have very strict rules about cleanliness. Washing before you eat, washing before your prayers. And I used to think, God's not interested in whether we're clean or not. God's interested in what your head and your heart are thinking. He's not interested whether you've rolled in the muck or not. But actually, the discipline of washing and helping other people to keep clean has an importance to humanity.
Do you think that organisation of keeping things tidy, yourself, your cell, also with the colouring and the things that make you feel like you have something to do, something meaningful to do? Maybe it's a page in a colouring book and the meaning is to finish the book, finish the page. Do you think that meaning is so important for people looking to find hope in the darkest situations?
Yes. At the very basic level, when I say I don't care if you go out and do more car crime, I care that you go out and that you're nice to old ladies and you're a decent dad and a good husband. Maybe that involves car crime. I don't know. But in my work in the prison, I have got to keep you sane and sensible, to go out, to be a good dad, to be a good husband, to be a person who doesn't steal violently. I don't know what they're all going to go out and do, but I want them to go out with cleanliness and good manners. It sounds so trivial to say it. But going out to be a good dad, to be friendly to your children.
That's the meaning that they need.
Would be a very great skill, even if you were doing a lot of other things that society didn't want you to do. I would have achieved something. The fact that when people are colouring or making toys, they'll say it's for my kids. And have you got cartoon books? I can write a note on the bottom and send it to my children. That you think, actually, I am supporting the best in them. That somebody else will have to work at the worst in them. But that will help the world if that child has a dad who loves. They've got something.
And maybe the dad who loves didn't have a dad who loved themselves.
No.
And that changes.
And that maybe a dad who loves thinks, hang on a moment, it's important to be with my children and I mustn't get myself to prison again. You can work on that as a message. Because it's no good being the best dad in the world and be in Wandsworth prison.
After everything you've seen, the cycles of forgiveness, pain, resilience, what's one thing that you would like someone to take from hearing your story as a Quaker and chaplain?
That people in prison are not different people. They're exactly like me and you and them. They have done stupid things and they've been caught. We've all done stupid things. All of us. I mean, I am old enough to have driven a car, a Mini, with probably 7 other people, all drunk in it. Driving when drunk was in the 60s and 70s fairly normal.
You just haven't been caught for it like they did.
I haven't been caught. I wasn't caught at the time and I don't do it anymore. There are lots of things that people do that border on inhumanity. I mean, people sell things, very, very expensive things that they know have cost threepence to make and that they are profiteering out of the shortcomings of others. They're not buying something for threepence and selling it for fourpence. They're buying something for threepence and selling it for £30. Maybe that's strangely immoral. We should all think, we like saying of our own lives that they're good and law-abiding, but maybe they're not quite as good and law-abiding or quite as moral as they could be.
I think everyone has their own snakes, right?
They do.
There's a principle from Stoic philosophy which I quite like. I think it might have been Socrates, ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, and he basically talks about how no one does wrong knowing they are doing wrong. For them, it has some meaning. The reason they did it has some means to an end. They didn't think I'm doing this because it's the wrong thing to do. They did it because for them there was some right in doing it, whether that right was against the law or against another person.
I've known boys in the prison who moved from doing pizza delivery and running a pizza shop to doing cannabis delivery, and doing it very efficiently, using all the skills they'd used in the pizza delivery business to take telephone orders and telephone delivery. They didn't themselves take drugs. And they were rather mystified why they were doing anything wrong, because they were selling to customers who wished to buy, which was all they'd done with pizzas. And there's a difference, but they were a bit mystified, and I can be mystified like them in that I know a man who plays golf with another man who ran a business of loaning money, legally loaning money, where if you loaned it for a week and paid it back, there was hardly any interest. But if you couldn't pay it back at the end of the week, the interest rates went up to 2,000 and 3,000%. And you think, well, he is a member of a golf club, and is a very respectable man who lives in a very respectable house. But that is a very immoral business. And when I look at the boys with the pizza delivery of cannabis, which was very cleanly done, and very efficient, and their customers, there was no trouble with their customers because their customers all wanted to buy and put in the orders properly. You think, yeah, I can understand why you're a bit confused, because I'm a bit confused. There's a sort of, and that sounds as if I'm in favour of cannabis, and I don't smoke it myself. But society's got some very muddled views.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You see that the people's views of, maybe the drug dealer selling cannabis with his pizza delivery company is the one who's in the wrong, but the interest in that golf payment has way more harm really on the person in the business.
And you also see socially, when you're a member of the middle classes, would you like a drink? Oh no, I'll have an orange juice. Oh no, you drink gin, have a gin. Have another gin. Do you want a double? And you think, actually, in our society, alcohol does as much harm as drugs. A different group in society, probably more masked, but it does a lot of damage. And yet, we all think it's funny.
Yeah, people say, oh, I got so smashed the other night, and people laugh.
Yes, it's funny. Now, it isn't funny, or it can be fun, but it is also very damaging to some people. But we slip that one by. We also sit in front of televisions where everybody that watches football is used to watching the banners running for gambling companies and watching the adverts for women to spend housekeeping money on silly games. Adverts for people who are clearly addicted to gambling on silly games. And we all sit there and we let it happen.
We think that just because it's legal, that means it's okay to do. Whereas the people who have done things that is framed illegal, they are the ones who are in the wrong.
But truthfully, we are watching those adverts and doing nothing about them. We are acknowledging that there are children in poverty because their parents have addictions to gambling. And we are allowing those addictions to gambling to go on without doing anything about it.
If you could send a message to someone who's maybe in a prison themselves, and I know you're not working in the prisons anymore, but someone who's in just a really dark place What would your message be to them?
Don't give up. There is an outside world. Talk to a chaplain, because generally speaking, they're very good sorts. Talk to anybody that will listen to you about what you think's gone wrong. Don't bottle it up. Even if you think the prison isn't listening, keep sending off the signs. I don't know. I look back on life in the prison, and I know that for many people in there, it is a very dark place.
I love your story. I love the goodness of your message, and I love what you're running for in the campaigns and stuff. I want to give you the opportunity to really, spread the message of the campaign and spread the message to the people about making a change for the prisons.
One of the things we need in the prisons, we need more officers, and we need better officers. I went to an inquest of a man who had been seriously suicidal. He'd attempted to hang himself. He'd been moved to another cell. He'd attempted to hang himself. He was moved to another cell. He set fire to his hair. And the officer who went to see him wrote in his notes that he just wanted to get out of his cell and he was manipulative. And the coroner said to the officer, when she was in the witness box, "How many people have you ever known that have set fire to their hair?" In sitting there listening to it, you think you're spot on, because that is a real sign of somebody who
losing their mind,
has lost their mind. It's serious damage to the self. It's very unusual damage to the self. It's gone beyond the normal overdose or hanging. It's gone into the realms of the weird now.
Self-torture.
Yes. And to use the word manipulative about it suggests that we need better officers.
Better training schemes?
Better training schemes. A man recently died in the prison, and his cellmate got up in the middle of the night for a wee and realised he wasn't breathing, and actually looked at his feet, and his feet were crinkled as if he'd been in a bath, which is a sign of rigor mortis. Okay, but he called for help. The officer in duty at night on that wing was a support officer, not a proper trained officer. He'd had about a week's training and he'd been in post about 3 weeks. When he went to the cell door and he wouldn't open the door, he said he couldn't open the door, he didn't have a key. He did have a key. It was in a pouch that you have to break, and either he was lying or he didn't know what was in his pouch. He didn't know he carried a key. He did the wrong call for help. So he didn't do the right. So help may have been slowed down in coming. When it came, they tried CPR, they tried electric paddles, and they tried putting in oxygen. The paramedics arrived. The CPR was being done at the wrong rate. The electric paddles had been put on in the wrong place. He'd been ventilated, but no oxygen attached. If he hadn't been already dead, we'd have killed him. That is the level of the training in first aid. Now, when you look out at men in the prison, you see 1,450 men who have all had difficult lives. Many of them addicts to drugs, to drink. Many of them have been hit on the head at some point or another, and therefore some suffer epilepsy in some form. If you have to risk assess what is going to happen overnight, somebody's going to be ill. It's not an infant school that you're looking out at. This is a seriously badly nourished, damaged population. And you're putting in charge of a wing of 180 men, a young man with a week's training, and whose ability to cope in an emergency is nil. We ought to be doing better.
Is there anything you'd like to show the camera, or?
Oh, well,
we can go to showing the camera if you want.
I don't know how. That's.
So you've got a few things to show
Do you
here.
want? If I leave them, then you could do a camera shot without me in it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the camera's on you, so if you don't want to be in it, or there you go. Pants for prisoners.
Pants for prisoners is how to get money for underwear or underwear in. These are little bookmarks, which actually prisoners suggested that we made, and that's the radio. And a man said of the radio, "The nights are the worst here because people cry. I go over the past, I panic. The radio's a diamond. I wind it up, put it by my pillow and escape into music." And I think that says it all, really. A pack of playing cards is great. My cellmate's all right. He's clean, but he speaks no English. Then we got a pack of cards, and we can't exactly talk now, but we do have a laugh. And again, you know, that's what you'd have to do if you're stuck with somebody that doesn't speak your language. Actually, a pack of cards will work.
Conversation cards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that you have to be pretty foolish. I don't know what in other languages it's called, but there's a game called, I used to call it Strip Jack Naked, where any fool can manage a game of cards where, if you put down the jack, you get one off the pack. If you put down the queen, you get two off the pack.
Games like Uno.
Yes.
Uno's a great game.
Yes.
It's played around the world, isn't it? So.
Yes. And that there are certain, we have boards for snakes and ladders. You really have to be a chump not to be able to manage snakes and ladders.
Yeah.
And that you can manage.